Hi, my name's Kristi Foster. I'm here with Dr. Nick Askew, and we're both co-founders of Terra Incognita, and we're really excited. It's a real pleasure to be here and be part of Digital Birdfair this year. Uh, and I think, like many people out there, we've been asking ourselves the question, how can we drive more positive change for people and for wildlife when tourism and travel starts to resume? So we'd like to share a new idea that we're currently developing. And this is an idea that came from our community of ecotourism operators, which is to develop a new global ethical code of conduct for ecotourism. So we'd like to explain just briefly the who, the why, and the how of this idea, and then what our next steps are and how you can get involved. So Terra Incognita, we're a global community of over 50 ecotourism operators and over 150 eco-bloggers who practice and promote ethical ecotourism. And that happens in over 50 countries around the world. Nick and I, we got started with Terra Incognita about 2 years ago because we recognized that so many ethical ecotourism businesses out there in the world, especially the smaller ones, they were really committed to operating ethically, but they were struggling to have their voices heard and to be discovered and recognized amidst other forms of tourism. And so we wanted to help. Collectively, we've got over 30 years experience in conservation, but also in sustainable development and ecotourism. And our specific expertise is in communications and marketing. So we saw an opportunity to really help and get behind the ecotourism businesses that we believe in.
Okay, thank you, Kristi. As you just heard, my name's Nick from Terra Incognita. It's really nice to be talking to you at the Digital Bird Fair this year. And since we started Terra Incognita a couple of years ago, we've been really blown away by what the operators we work with achieve for conservation, for local people, and also in terms of just providing a great experience for the guests as well. And when COVID-19 hit, we also just took a moment just to pause and to ask our operators, how can we better support them, or you, the operator, if that's who you are. And one of the biggest themes that stood out through those conversations was the need for a global, a code of conduct that helps to recognize and differentiate ethical ecotourism operators and really help to do four things. First, it's to sort of drive real action on the ground to make real changes, to help people to have a measurable impact both locally and globally, and help operators to tell their story and showcase their ethics, much clearer messaging so people can understand this is the level that the operators are working to, this is what they're striving to achieve, and this is how they're helping. And then finally, something to help you, the tourist, to make better decisions and to support tourism for good across the globe.
Okay, thanks, Nick. So we also recognize that there are some countries and some regions out there that already have excellent standards for ecotourism and lots of great examples of best practice ecotourism that we can learn from and we can support. But we also believe that sustainability and ecotourism is a journey, and many operators, especially smaller operators, need support in order to be their best. So they need a way to be recognized amidst a sea of other tourism businesses and other types of tourism. And that's something that they've asked for. So this concept of an ethical code of conduct is really about recognizing a strong commitment and ambitious steps to improve so that we're driving and we're supporting and we're growing the kind of tourism that we all want in the future.
So what's the process that we've gone through so far for the code? Well, at the moment, we've had input from over 70 operators, experts from the media, and also tourists, which have helped us to draft 11 principles, which form the basis of a code of conduct. Now, I'd quite like 10, but we've got 11, so we're sticking with that. And we'll walk you through those in a minute and talk through the differences between them all. So far, we've held calls and had initial feedback from the operators, and now through today and on for the next few weeks, we're looking for wider input to refine these principles down and get something which is really going to make the change that we're seeking to make in the world. The timeline for this is obviously we're talking about the code now. It's August, Bird Fair. We're looking to finalize it within the next month or so through into September. And really, we want to get you involved, really. It's a community-generated code. Your input's really essential to make this work in practice and to really get the code out there. So listen to the 11 principles we're going to walk through in a second, and then we'd love to hear your opinions. You can share your opinions at the end. We're going to tell you how to do that. So let's get going. Let's walk through the 11 principles. So the first one up is we put wildlife first, and that's really important to us as a community of ethical ecotourism operators. So if an activity might change the natural behavior of wildlife beyond just a minor transitory impact, we don't do it, okay? We follow guidance for wildlife interactions to minimize negative impacts on wildlife, and we ask our guests and our partners to do the same. And where recognized guidance isn't available, we develop our own best practice and guidance. Now, I think a good example of this is whale shark ecotourism, which is, you know, a big industry in many places where these beautiful fish are found. And our guests and operators are asked to follow the whale shark code of conduct, which is a global standard that's been agreed. They don't swim in front of a fish, for instance, you know, and get in the way and change its behavior. They don't get within 3 meters when they're swimming. There's no flash photography, and boats have to stay at a safe distance away and travel really slowly. So we've only a small numbers allowed within a sort of 20, 30 meter zone of the fish. So I think it's a good example of how the code is helping to, or seeking to deliver, putting wildlife first. Secondly, and also around wildlife conservation, which is really a kind of foundation of what we're seeking to achieve, is about not just kind of minimizing or avoiding impacts, it's about creating positive impact and making change. So number 2 is we conserve and enhance wildlife. So operators following the code actively support and work with conservation organizations or initiate their own activities. And examples of this might include, but they're not limited to, you know, donations to wildlife conservation initiatives, collaborations with local, regional, or international conservation organizations, delivering conservation education for guests, but also for local people, for children, you know, for the future of conservation. And another example would be collecting and sharing citizen science data. So through the trips, you know, capturing and recording the sightings of whatever it might be, snakes or birds or other species, and then sharing that back with organizations that can use those data to create more informed decisions. And a really good example of an operator doing this, very briefly, would be Glorious Bustards and their Flyways Promise, which is about celebrating and supporting migratory bird conservation between Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. And it's a great initiative and something that, you know, many operators are interested in, that sort of approach.
Okay, so our third principle is we respect local people. So we respect and we work alongside local and Indigenous communities to make sure that tourism doesn't change their lifestyle unless they want it to do so. We follow, again, global, national, and or local best practice guidance to minimize negative impacts on local people, and we ask our guests and partners to do the same. If recognized guidance isn't available, we develop our own best practice guidance. So perhaps a nice example of this, and this woman in the image is actually a Peruvian woman from the Andes. In Peru, there are a lot of Indigenous communities, local communities, and even uncontacted peoples. So those people are the ones who should be deciding whether they want to engage with tourism at all, and if so, what kind of tourism they want to benefit from, how much, when, where, and how, really. So our next principle, number 4, is we benefit local people. So that last principle was about respect. You know, it's sort of more of an attitude of respecting local and Indigenous people. This one, we benefit local people, is more of an action that we want to take. So we work in partnership with local communities to help solve one or more specific challenges. These might be economic, social, or cultural, or a combination, through our own operations. And examples of these might be collaborations with civil society or community-based organizations. They might be donations to community causes, might be participation in local community events, or again, collecting and sharing valuable citizen science data that can help other organizations and other people. So again, this principle is really about an action. How do we create benefits for people that go above and beyond what would happen if an operation, an ecotourism operation, didn't exist? Okay, and principle number 5 is we strive for a positive impact. So we strive for net positive impact on people and planet in every business decision that we make. And what this means is that we focus on sustainability by limiting any negative environmental, socioeconomic, and cultural impacts, and we amplify positive impacts as far as possible. So some examples of environmental impacts, for instance, are consumption. So how an operation is using energy, how they're sourcing food, how they're dealing with waste, whether that's carbon emissions or plastic. And we try and achieve this by following sort of 5 steps. The first being avoiding impacts, the second minimizing impacts, and then if needed, restoring, and then offsetting any negative impacts before we try and create additional benefits. And those additional benefits would be created through the first few principles we talked about for conservation and for local people. So this principle, we strive for positive impact, kind of helps us think about the concept of greenwashing, which is quite common in the tourism sector, where things can perhaps be labeled as eco or green, but maybe they aren't so much in practice. Because if you can have benefits, those benefits are most valuable if the whole business as a whole is operating sustainably, rather than just kind of tacking on some nice benefits on top without worrying about how the business as a whole is operating.
Thanks, Kristi. Then, so on to number 6 out of 11. So we share our knowledge. So our operators using the code, they use education and interpretation to amplify positive impacts for people on the planet, building a greater environmental, social, political, and cultural awareness, understanding and respect for everyone involved, and empowering ambassadors to multiply their effects. And I think an example of this might include, but they're not sort of limited to, learning and sharing their expertise. That's locally, nationally, or even internationally, training guides and educating the future guides. You can see in the image here, this is Experienced Nature, one of the operators that we work with at TI, teaching young Sri Lankans, these are potential guides of the future, field identification skills as part of the World Wide Garden Birdwatch Survey. Other examples would be, educating travellers to act responsibly, or providing resources for their guests and their partners and things like that. So sharing knowledge is a really core part of the code.
So number 7, we respect boundaries. If we can't do something in line with this code, we don't do it. If we shouldn't enter a site because of protection or local laws and rules, we don't. Number 8, we avoid irreplaceable losses. So that means we commit to never damaging the world irreplaceably through our activities. And we recognize that in some special places and special cases, no tourism or highly restricted tourism might be the only form of ethical and sustainable tourism. And that might mean we have to make some tough decisions sometimes. So an example of this comes from Peru also. This photo is looking across a valley at Machu Picchu, a very well-known site. And Peru is home to many sacred sites, and also to a great wealth of biodiversity. And as I mentioned before, uncontacted peoples. So there's some places where tourism can only happen if it's very carefully regulated, or it's only a certain type of tourism. And there's other places where it can't sustainably happen at all.
And then 9 and 10, the penultimate 2. Number 9 is we contribute to a global community who travel for good. This is really important to us. It's about sharing our expertise, creating more impact, being bigger than the kind of sum of our parts, and being collaborative. So we commit to working within a network of ecotourism operators who strive to improve the tourism sector. We work together. And then number 10, we're the eyes on the ground as well. So again, people following the code, we're looking for these people to act as local guardians, the eyes on the ground, supporting efforts to enforce the protection of people and the planet wherever we go. Okay, so if we're at a site, we seek to protect it as best as we can. If we see something dodgy, we either stop it or we report it, whatever safe is to happen at that time.
Okay, and lastly, we strive to continuously improve. So we recognize that ethical ecotourism isn't just a goal, it's also a journey. And there's always more that we can learn and we can do. So we do our best within our means, always looking for ways to increase our overall positive impact. And we measure and we report our impacts each year to track how we're growing.
And that's it. That's all 11. Whistle Stop Tour. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you can see how that can really help to improve standards with industry, help to for you, the operator, to kind of showcase your credentials to tourists. And if you are a tourist, hopefully it'll help you to kind of choose better tours, knowing that your tour is going to, you know, create more impact and drive more change actually through your activities and through your travel. What's next for the code? Well, getting input is really essential to make this code work in practice. It's still a draft, which is why we're presenting it to you here today. It's a community generated draft. So, you know, we're organizing the process, but we're really listening carefully as to your needs as operators and tourists. So if you'd like to get involved and to give your input and to provide your feedback as we develop and launch the code over the coming weeks, you can visit our webpage. You can see it on screen there. It's terra-incognita.travel/code. That'll take you to a page where you can see all the 11 codes laid out again, all the principles, and you can provide your input in a really quick and easy kind of survey at the end. It takes no more than a minute or two. So we'd really like to hear your thoughts. What did you like? What did you not like? What can we improve? You can also register for updates on that page. You can hear about process, hear about when it's launched. And if you've got any questions, you want to get in touch, we love hearing from you. It's hello@terra-incognita.travel. You can see it on screen as well. On behalf of Kristi and I, thank you so much for having us today. We're really looking forward to your feedback and involvement. We hope Birdfair is going to start again in the non-digital, in the literal form over at Rutland again very soon. We look forward to seeing you there. Take care for now.